Uh-oh, you know what time it is, Sharpie.
I think I do.
What time is it, Sharpie?
Prime time.
It's prime time. Take it away, Andy.
What time is it? What time is it? It's prime time. Prime time. What time is it? What time is it? It's prime time. Prime time. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from around the world. It's Tuesday. Tuesday means it's prime time at Taylor Guitars. Welcome, everybody. Say hello to Chris Sharp down there. Hey, Chris, what's happening?
Hey, everybody.
Tonight, we have the only guest that we've invited back.
Woohoo!
Please welcome Mr. Bob Taylor.
Hey, Andy. Everybody.
This is episode number 10, Jay, is that right? I can't believe they're letting us do another show. Your host, Mr. Jay Parkin. Hey, Jay. It's prime time. Prime time.
It's so good. Bob,
That thing goes around like it's a small world in my head.
I know. I mean, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 10th episode of Taylor Primetime. The 10th. We did 10
Crazy.
things. And welcome back, Bob Taylor. We promised them a live rapid fire Ask Bob session, so that's what we're doing here. In fact, we get all sorts of emails to us. People love the show. People are having a good time. We got so many questions for this episode. In fact, 21 pages of emailed questions in for the show. So we're excited to get to that. But we got an email from a fella this week, and he said that we BS too much. So you know what? Let's get right into some questions. How's that?
Let's do it.
Responding to comments. That's customer care right there.
You got it. We hear you loud and clear, so we're giving you your favorite episode. So I got a question, Bob, before we get into our rapid fire question or session, and that is, what do you think of Primetime, and can you believe we've done 10 episodes here during this COVID time?
Well, I love prime time. I've watched every episode, start to finish. A few of them live and a few of them as reruns a couple hours later. Watched a couple of them more than once, maybe not all the way twice. I love hearing Andy's songs. Those are highlights. I think the greatest thing for me is during this time and watching all the goings on around Taylor is that somehow or other, we have people here that work at Taylor who care about it as much as me and are out there like you guys doing your thing to keep us going forward. And I don't know, makes me feel like I can die finally. You know, you guys are doing a good job. I can go.
No, stay. We have fun with you.
There he goes again, talking about that Bob Ash burst.
No, I've had super proud moments watching this. To be a little bit gooey, really proud moments.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate Kurt and Andy and everybody that we work with. And you know what? Let's not leave them hanging any longer. Let's dive into some questions. Hey, Andy. Take it away, Andy.
Rapid fire. What wood is good? What shape for me? Setups and tunings. What about trees? Why do you use these little black knobs? Here's your chance to talk to Bob on Rapid Fire. Rapid Fire.
Oh man, I love it.
Unbelievable.
Well,
That was-
last time I was on, you guys, we chit chatted for the whole entire time, which is so people could have we went over, all the walking uphill to school both ways, the whole thing in the early days. And then we ended up, hey, let's take questions. And 1.5 questions later, like, we're out of time. So we thought, let's come back and do rapid fire questions. So I'm not going to make love to all these questions. It's rapid fire. I'm going to give short answers. I'm just going to say, if someone asks a question and I give a short answer, it's not meant to be rude. It's meant to be rapid fire. Is that cool with you guys?
I love
Let's
it.
do
I
it.
love the rules. These are good. So just a reminder, there are rules, right? These are guitar-related questions. That's the rule. We're talking about guitars on a guitar nerd talk show.
Yep.
So I'm going to give it 45 minutes. How do you guys feel about that? 45 minutes to questions. I got a timer I'm about to push. I'll show you the timer. And we're going to go from that. Hey, Sharpie, you want to get a question ready?
Yeah, I got one.
All right. 45 minutes. Let's go.
Dr. Flores, hey, Bob, any thoughts on a GS Mini nylon?
Yes, we're going to make one. I can't tell you when, but it's sort of like an obvious thing to do.
Nice.
Awesome. I got another question. Have you done or will you consider a fan fret guitar?
I haven't done it. I'm not considering it between right this moment and as far as I can see in the future. It's too obscure for someone like Taylor to put it out on the market.
Andy, you want to go?
Sure. I've got a question here that came in from a fella, Ken Cope, who says that he met you at Harrods in London a couple years ago. He said at the time, he told you that he owns a guitar you made in 1995, which he thinks is one of the best guitars ever made. You replied, you remembered the particular model and you think it was. Recently on Primetime, it was said by me, that's why I'm bringing this question. It was said that you had been asked, what's the best guitar you've ever made? And you were quoted as replying, the next one. Because this is something I've heard you speak about a lot. And so his thought, and this is good because it's obvious that when I answer that question, I don't answer it correctly. I don't give it enough back story. So he says, my next guitar, how confident can I be that it's going to be the best choice? And does this imply that my previous model was inferior? Good question.
Inferior's a negative term to talk about something getting improved. So I don't like to think negatively about yesterday's guitar. Yesterday's guitar is what it is. And as a matter of fact, it still might be the very best guitar we ever made for him, right? Yeah. We all know that we love a guitar and nothing can replace that. So I think every time we come up with an improvement, we always get a raft, not a boat, maybe just a raft of questions that come in and go, well, what about my guitar? You're saying it's inferior. And we're not saying it's inferior. We're saying that we're making improvements, and we should make improvements. If I didn't make improvements, I'd still be making the guitar I made in Lemon Grove, which if I hold them up right now to this one, these are better. So there's another part to that question that I heard, which is how can I be sure that the next guitar that I order is as good or is the best guitar for me? And I'm going to say for him, I'm sorry, I forgot his name from the beginning. But I'm going to say, play the guitar before you buy it. Really, play it before you buy it.
Ken Cope, we try to bring discussions in Primetime back to sort of a roadshow format as well. And this question, I think that the one example I can give to back up what you just said is V-class to me is a refinement, right? An improvement in intonation. Maybe more, to me, maybe more than anything. The improvement in intonation, right? But that doesn't, I have not sold any of my old guitars.
No.
Because they're not V-class. They still have a charm. And like you said, will it be the best one? It's improved in some ways, but
the thing about a guitar is it doesn't quit working the way that it worked because something else is better. It's not like my smartphone, which actually quits working. The world moves on and then that smartphone can't keep up. and it ends up being no good,
Yeah.
right? Clothes wear out, but when a guitar wears out, it kind of wears in, you know? That's kind of two different ways of saying that same thing. So the guitar you love is still the guitar you love.
Want to go ahead, Chris? Sharpie. They don't
My
know.
turn?
It's Chris. Your name's Chris. Sharpie, you want to go ahead?
Technically, my name's Chris, but yeah. Let's see. Gabe O'Brien, Bob, what gets you jazzed every day after all these years in the business?
Improvements. Funny, nice segue, unplanned, but improvements. Being a tweak head and improving the factory, improving the guitars, improving the use of wood, improving our relationship with our customers, improving my relationship with our employees, watching the company grow, stand on its own 2 feet. Everything's not dependent on me. That gets me jazzed. I could go on and on and on, but it's just going to be improvement.
That's amazing. I got a question from Francesca. This one was emailed in. Will you be creating more versions of the GS Mini? Side question. Will you consider creating an all solid body version?
We're going to consider more versions of the GS Mini. We have a whole bunch of them. When we first, let me just stop and say, this is the 10th show. It's also the 10th anniversary of the GS Mini. What was that, 2 weeks ago? So we're in the 10th anniversary. And in that time, we have sold, put on your seatbelts, 350,000 GS Minis. I can't believe we made them. I can't believe we sold them. That guitar it's almost the people's guitar. We should call it the Volks guitar, maybe. We started with one version. We must have 10. They're different woods, different tops, E's, this type of thing. But I've already said that we'll probably do a nylon string, because that's just an obvious thing for, well, so many people. I immediately go to students or people just starting out, or children who have a hard time pushing out steel strings, but it's also a tone. But I don't see a solid body version. I don't see that as being something special that we would be making that you can't find somehow else.
Awesome. Andy.
Has Taylor considered development of an Archtop? It's difficult to find a great sounding acoustic Archtop at reasonable price points. From Richard Estrella.
You're totally right, Richard. The very best Archtops are the ones that have great acoustic sound. You know, acoustic Archtops like from way back 100 years ago. A lot of times I think we can confuse jazz boxes, you know, that are more electric in nature rather than those super old cool acoustic Archtops. And it is hard to find one, because when there's a good one, they cost an incredible amount of money. Here's a secret. Andy Powers, who you guys all know about, who designs our guitars, his specialty, the thing that he's better at than anything else, and maybe better at, as good or better at than anybody who makes guitars in the world today, are Archtops, really good Archtops. We've seen them, we've played them. Andy Lunn, you know, they're good.
Yeah.
And so we're definitely going to make one. To let everybody know, we put in a whole bunch of work, hundreds and hundreds of hours of work in the last 8 months to put out our own 5-year plan of the guitars that we're going to release. There's going to be a lot of neat guitars. I can't really tell you that 5-year plan. However, we'll kind of roll about 18 months ahead of that, because there could be some changes, but we have a lot of great guitars to come out in that time, and Archtop is on the list.
Awesome.
Awesome. Sharpie.
Sambo 76. Bob, how many guitars do you own?
Wow.
160,000 a year.
Right?
I'm trying not to own those, Andy.
No.
I'm trying to be a river, not a lake. A river.
Guitar's bad.
Guitar's bad. We have this saying when things get tough: guitar's bad, money good. In other words, turn them into money, change them. It's how we trade guitars for groceries. Okay, so the answer to that is, right now I think I own maybe 20 guitars. I had about 40 or 50, And most of them were just sort of special Taylors that I bought along the line. And by the way, I buy my guitars. Our accounting department knows where my office is, and they're relentless. I take a guitar. If sometimes I'll see a guitar that's special, or I have one made, or I want to get something. But I culled the herd a few years ago, and I had Terry Myers, who's been on this show, sell them for me. And he did it on Reverb, and he did it anonymously. They weren't Bob Taylor guitars. They were just guitars, because I didn't want to create something in the force, you know. And then the guys from Reverb go, oh man, you should have given to us. We could have sold them as a collection, which is exactly what I didn't want to do. I wasn't interested in money. I was interested in just rolling those in. And so I said I called the herd. And I actually built a room in my man cave. I have a separate building with my wood shop in it and my auto shop in it. And I have a beautiful room. I set it up like a Premier Taylor room. And I think I have about 12, 14 guitars on display, all the way back to, well, my high school guitar is on display in the lobby. But the first 810 that I made a long time ago, now I'm going to get in trouble for not making that 810 anymore. But I have that over there, and a few other guitars that the models that we have now sort of sprang forth from. So those are all sentimental to me. What I don't have, which I'm really keen to get, is some Andy Powers guitars, because really they're better than the ones I made. Andy's a better guitar builder than me. He just is.
Awesome. All right. So there's a couple of statements, not questions. One of the statements, I'm sorry I lost your name, but one of the statements was, the best guitar Bob ever built is mine. A statement. And then the other one was, the host has a nice red hat. Hi, Mom. Thanks for watching. All right, now let me get into the questions. I got a good one. Here's a good one. We get this often. We get it on tours a lot. Hello, Bob. This is from Bill. Why did you stop offering R. Taylor guitars?
Because the concept was hard to understand in the world of Taylor guitar dealers. Okay, we thought we could do a Toyota thing and a Lexus thing, but our industry is too small to pull that off. We weren't able to do it. So what happened is we made our Taylors, and we went out and picked, I don't know, maybe 20 dealers to sell. And to make a really long story short, the better business model for us was to make custom Taylors. Everybody understood that. We didn't have sort of hurt feelings between a Taylor dealer who wasn't an R Taylor dealer, and an R Taylor dealer who wasn't a Taylor dealer, and a dealer that was both dealers. It was just a very difficult business model. So the guitar was nice, the distribution model failed. We quit doing things that fail. We keep doing things that work. So that's the answer.
Love it. Who's next? Sharpie.
Me? Okay, I got one from Phil. Making a lap steel guitar.
Thought of it, but I'm not going to do it.
I love the answer.
Yeah. This is rapid fire. That's good. Okay, let's go.
Yep.
Andy.
This is a good one because we get this on the road all the time, and I'd like to hear what Bob's response is. I know what I say, but this is from Dennis Pope. Says, hello. Thank you for this opportunity. Why can't I purchase a Taylor guitar made in the U.S. or Mexico from all solid wood of choice for $600 or $700? I'm 63 years old. I just started playing last year. I am now ready for a quality acoustic guitar that will enhance my playing. My next purchase will be in this price range. Thanks for your consideration.
Well, what a youngster, 63. I'm 65. That just, man, I'd love to go back to 63. There's a big difference, actually. I'm feeling it. Because it costs more money to produce a guitar, especially all made in the United States. Without going down a rabbit hole, I find that we in America want to make the most money we have, American jobs, keep them here. Let's pay us well, but we want to spend the least amount of money we can possibly spend. But when you're spending money on something that's making, if you're paying somebody to make something, you got to pay for it. So our our rent, our overhead, our materials, our machines, our maintenance, our R&D, our marketing, our sales, our labor, all of this stuff, we can't make a guitar cost $600 or $700. And if we go to Mexico, solid wood isn't the right thing for there. Layered wood is the right thing for Mexico. Why? Because we need to be able to make that guitar in a very, very streamlined fashion. Solid wood guitars, you've got to buy that wood, stack that wood, dry the wood, age the wood, read at bedtime stories, make sure that it's nurtured right. And with veneer wood, you're off to a head start because you have a lower cost for nicer wood, because you get 40 slices of that with no sawdust out of an inch thick of wood, whereas you get 4 slices of solid wood out of an inch thick piece of wood. And you can open up a box of that and pass it out like paper plates at a picnic and start using it immediately. You don't have to go through the years of raising that wood to a point to where it's ready to become a guitar. So those two things really don't work in either situation. It just costs more money to make a guitar than $600.
Can I add to that too, to Mr. Pope's question? Just because it's made out of solid wood doesn't mean it sounds better. And I would encourage him, because I've done this shootout dozens of times, because this question is a common one, because we see so many, you can buy really nice all solid wood guitars these days for $600-700, $800, whatever. But that doesn't mean it necessarily sounds better than a 214 CE.
I totally, completely agree with that, because the nuances on a guitar, the devil's in the details on a guitar.
Yeah.
And the details get overlooked. The details that we put in a guitar are really deep and wide. We go and go and go at it. And in a place like Mexico, we put all those details in. We just industrialize it to where the details are there, but yet we can move through them quickly. Once we get into guitars made in El Cajon, the personal care that it receives through the factory. In fact, when people come see the factory, they're like, oh, okay, I kind of get it, right? Yeah. So it's kind of hard to imagine if you've never seen it. Yeah.
And we have to make sure Sharpie has sweet Hawaiian shirts. It's got to go back to Sharpie somehow.
It's what I get up and think about every day.
Thanks, Bob.
Awesome. You know what? It's really interesting. Last week we got a question, the same question from a different viewer, and they said, "Don't give me that nonsense about labor and how much it costs to run a business. Why don't you move to a different state where it's cheaper?"
Yeah. It's not cheaper.
Right.
It's not cheaper.
Right.
I don't really hear people in the heartland talking about the fact that they're working in a cheap place, right? It's not cheaper. The difference between a couple dollars an hour is, we do our own ways to keep our things going. You move to a different state and you work from 8 till 5, and then you close the factory for the rest of the week and the rest of the day. We use our factory 17 hours a day, right? So we double up on all these things. We do all the things to equalize that. It's not cheaper.
Yeah. Appreciate answering that question. That one's great, Bob. I got one for you. This is from Mark Bunger.
Oh, wait a minute. I want to add one more thing.
Okay.
This is where we live. Who's going to move to another state? All 500 people, 465 people at Taylor Guitars? Who's going to move to another state? Hey, come on, everybody. We're moving to another state because Bob says, no, this is where we live.
That happens. Can I work remotely and just stay here? Is that cool?
The numbers say that 80% of people would stay here. The 20% that leave, half of them will come back. That's kind of what happens. So no, the other reason we make guitars here is because this is where we live. We live here. We make guitars where we live.
Heck yeah. You wanted Andy Powers to be from San Diego, and look where he's from. Close enough, right?
That's right, from San Diego.
So back to Mark's question. Hi, Bob. Have you ever thought of building a carbon fiber guitar?
I thought about it. Yes, I won't do it. I don't like carbon fiber guitars personally. some people want a carbon fiber guitar because they can expose it to any type of weather condition and it stays in tune, it doesn't move. Okay, that's cool. There's people that do that. Some people want it because they think it's better on the environment. That's not cool because it's not better on the environment. And I don't have to, that's a whole, we should do a whole environmental show sometime. Rapid fire environmental questions. I like the sound of wood, and there's so many choices of wood. Some people say, since we're running out of wood, well, we're not running out of wood because guess what? It grows on trees. You plant it and it turns into wood. So anyways, I don't want to make a fiber guitar. They don't interest me.
Sharpie.
The feed is blowing up right now. I have my next 3 ready to go. So first one is going to be Mike. He said, I'm going to keep asking. He's asked a couple times in the feed. Will Taylor offer bracing in a Grand Auditorium 12 fret, either as a fall limit via the BTO program?
Okay, you cut out twice on me, Sharpie. Oh. So can you say it again?
One more time. Okay, so when will Taylor offer V-Class in the Grand Auditorium 12 fret, either as a fall limited or via the BTO program?
I wish I knew. I have no idea. I really don't, because we sneak up on all of these things based on all kinds of A, market needs, and B, Taylor needs. And if whoever's been in our product development meetings, which we have once a week, it's a matter of production capacity, new ideas that we want to put out, the wood and tone woods that we have in stock, the materials that we get, and like the adoption, the turn at rates. And so a lot of times people think of Taylor as a way that we can make the guitar that they want. And I guess we have 130, 40 models of guitars, and we could have 500 models of guitars, but getting them to people, it's like you almost can't get there from here because there's got to be this sort of streamlined way to get it out, to talk about it. So I just don't know the answer to that question. And it's not that I'm trying to be coy. I don't know that.
Yeah. I'm gonna jump in and take another one because you talked about being in product development meetings. This comes from somebody who may have been in one before, Dave Hostler. He said, hey, he said any full-size T5 bass going to be a thing.
You know, Dave, we don't have that on the radar right now, but what a lot of listeners should know is that the T5 came from a bass. And we all sat around and go, that's kind of cool. In fact, it is cool. We have a couple of them laying around here, and it's kind of cool. And then one day we said, how many of those are we going to sell? Let's take the neck off and put a guitar neck on. And Dave, you sort of led that project. I remember it was August and we had the guitar in production and showing it by January, which was, someone asked Ed the other day, how long does it take to get the R&D and the tooling done for a guitar? And he's like, well, it depends. And that's a long answer. But the shortest we ever did it was August to December. And that was for the T5. I don't know, Dave. I don't know when it will come up. You know, Dave, that everything that we do always turns into a guitar. Yeah. Ukuleles turn into guitars, basses turn into guitars. Everything turns into a guitar by the time we're done.
Yep. This has 4 strings. It needs 2.
Well, we do have the GS Mini bass, which was worth the effort. Andy sort of did it, you know, with a lot of R&D that took some time. But one day it was like, boom, make this. And we had to make a couple things and we were able to do it. So, and it was a good thing. I know bass players would love to be able to enjoy a relationship with Taylor. It's kind of hard to compete against a P bass, right?
Ooh, jazz bass, pretty cool too.
Or jazz bass.
I got a question from the feed over here. Hey Bob, this one's been asked a couple of times. Hey Bob, I love the Ebony Project. Are you planning on doing a similar thing in any other country than Cameroon?
Well, everything that we do in a country is really tailored to that country or that region. So we own the business in the milling business in Africa, or in Cameroon. We don't own anything that has to do with planting. That is just pure funded. That's purely funded, to be honest, by me personally through UCLA to plant those trees. I will say that this was our most proud year because we planted all the trees, even though nobody from outside of Cameroon was able to travel there. So our planting program has taken root so well that they were able to do it locally, which was the purpose of that, to kind of make a grassroots crowdsourced planting scheme. In Hawaii, we do something very similar, and we're doing it with koa. So there's planting of koa. We call it sort of conservation forestry, and it's a totally different program. That company is called Paniolo Tonewoods, Paniolo, Paniolo. Paniolo is a Hawaiian name for a cowboy. And if anyone wants to go to paniolotonewoods.com, you can read about our business there. It's, again, a partnership. And then we do more local things where in Honduras, in Guatemala, Fiji, and then we have our urban forestry thing that's happening here where we're making guitars from urban ash. So we have tentacles everywhere, but taking the Ebony Project and repeating it somewhere, the rules change no matter where you go, or the need changes. So the answer is yes, but not in the same way. We try and do something that's really makes sense for the wood and for the location.
Awesome.
That wasn't very rapid, but it was a deep topic.
Andy.
Well, it was a good answer because it kind of answered my question too, which was from Larry Couch, and he's talking about a hurricane that came through his part of town in Florida, his part of the state in Florida. And does Taylor ever consider using this type of wood? Are there avenues to save such trees for future events? So the Urban Ash Project sort of comes into that answer, I think.
Yeah, the urban ash, and people are learning about that a little bit at a time. I don't know how many of our viewers right now know about the urban ash and the new guitars we're making out of it. That exists because of three people that are alive. Bob Taylor, Steve McMahon of Pacific Rim Tonewoods, and Pat Mahoney and his son, Big John Mahoney at West Coast Arborists, okay? Because of this trifecta of people who want to do it, it's being done. Now, without West Coast Arborists, we wouldn't have access to the wood. This is a very forward-thinking arborist who has contracts of 300 cities in California, has more than 7 million trees under their care, and they know the trees that are being removed for whatever reason a tree has to be removed. And believe me, it's not like, hey, that's a nice tree, let's cut it down. No, that's a tree that's going to fall over and kill somebody. That's a tree that's ruining the plumbing. That's a tree that's going to fall on a house. And they're only city property. We haven't even got into private property, but they had the foresight years ago to hope that there was value in this. And they put together a log yard. They started collecting the logs, started cutting slabs. They started making mulch and firewood and some wood and putting together a small sawmill. I'm saying that to say that they're unique in the world. Somebody like that would actually have to exist around in Florida to go get that wood. So it's one of those things that's like, I can see it from where I stand, but I can't get there from here because there's not a distribution process. So all the work that we do, the work that I talked about on the last question and the work here, we call them demonstration projects. Because we know that Taylor can't change the world unless we can demonstrate that the world can be changed, and that other people get in competition with us or do it too, right? And so that's the purpose of what we're doing. Maybe we'll inspire someone in Florida to get something going like that as well, all around the world. But they're going to have to see what it takes to do it. And you never know where a hurricane is going to blow over wood. And you're only going to be lucky if there tends to be loggers there. So it's a crying shame when that happens.
Yeah. Sharpie.
All right. Paul Tabak. You secured the Liberty Tree wood and built some outstanding guitars with it. Any other cool woods in your place?
Not like that. That's a once in a lifetime type of thing. And you can't get that wood on purpose. For example, a few years ago, the tree that was outside Anne Frank's house had to be taken down, okay? Things came our way. This could be great. You could make a guitar. Let's see if we can get it. And my answer was, the minute you want it, you can't have it. Trees that have some type of fame like that also have a million, or in the case of the Anne Frank tree, 100 million opinions about that tree. And so the Liberty tree came to me when I decided there's no way I could get it. And I was just minding my own business, and I got a phone call and it came my way. Totally accidental. I didn't do anything except say yes, but it is really hard to find a historical tree and then go make a proposition about it, because you're instantly seen as a profiteer.
Sure. Got it. I got one from Jeffrey Crooks. I'm quite excited about the new American Dream guitars. I've never heard of using Eucalyptus for the fretboard. How did you decide to go that route? Why and what regular fretboard would be considered similar to it in hardness and feel?
Rosewood would be the most similar to the blue gum eucalyptus that we're using, that is being smoked in Spain, actually. So this wood comes from eucalyptus plantations. Now, for you environmentalists out there that don't like plantations, I'm sorry, but it was planted a long time ago. And it's actually a nice wood source. So eucalyptus is all over the world, and in Spain, they planted plantations years and years ago. That wood is being harvested now, and there's a process of fuming or smoking wood that's been around for a really long time. It's only done in a few parts of the world anymore because it's a little bit, it's a little bit, it takes a real factory to do it that can move the gases into a chamber and move them back out of a chamber and not cause any harm to anything. And so there are people that specialize in that. It has to do with tannins in the wood. If wood has a natural tannins and you expose it to certain gases, ammonia in this case, it will turn dark all the way through it. And so why do we use it? And how we're able to get it? Well, we have Spanish partners in our acrylicam business, our ebony business, and they sell wood. And so being close to home, this is something that they began to develop this into a fingerboard bridge wood. We can only use so much ebony. We make, I don't know, when we're in the non-COVID, social distancing times, our production was around 750 guitars a day. So, I mean, I just can't put more strain on ebony, even though we own a mill. So we need to have a secondary wood. And this one seems great because it could be an urban wood, like we're harvesting it here. It could be a plantation wood. It doesn't have to be a forest wood. And we can turn it a really nice color. There's a second species of eucalyptus that grows all over California and that isn't planted in Spain that we really, really love. And it is way closer to ebony. It's harder than the blue gum. And so we've done testing and we're able to color that to a beautiful color. So we're doing a test right now of urban trees that we've sent up to Washington to have cut. That wood's going to be sent all the way to Spain and be colored. And then it's going to be turned into fingerboards and sent all the way back to us. And there's some people that are going to think that's a lot of transportation, but it's not a lot more transportation than wood that comes from Fiji, wood that comes from Africa, wood that comes from India, wood that comes from Alaska. We live in a world of shipping, and so we're able to do this stuff on containers, and it just moves along. So we're constantly trying to develop wood sources that are ethical, moral, environmental for the future to take care of maybe dwindling of one supply of wood, increased demand for guitars. So that's, get me on environmentalists and or environmentalism and talking about wood. The answers are just, I can't just say no. I can't just say yes.
Awesome. Andy.
This is from a guy who owns a 615 since 2001. He loves it. He sits around, he plays on his couch, but he's been thinking for years about buying a dreadnought, and we do not make a traditional our traditional dreadnought anymore. So his question is, of the Pacific and Auditorium bodies with rosewood and spruce combination, which of the two models will sound and play more like an 810 dreadnought?
Andy, I'm going to compare notes with you, because when I think about that, I think instantly dreadnought, go ahead, the Grand Pacific, but the Grand Pacific was specifically designed to have a different flavor of tone than what a lot of people think about when they pick up a Taylor. So my final answer on that, unless I could be convinced otherwise, is that the Grand Auditorium is going to remind him more of an old 810 than a Grand Pacific. What do you think?
Interesting. I would say we got this question last week too, because it was a straight up question. What's the closest guitar you guys make that sounds like an HD28?
Well, that's different than an 810.
Yeah. All right. And our answer was HD28 is what you should get.
Exactly.
That's the sound you want. And I answered it by saying we have a dreadnought shape. We have a guitar that's in the dreadnought category. Does it sound like an HD28? No, not really. There are some things that you could mistake it for if it was within a mix or with playing within a band. Would you be able to tell the difference? Maybe not. Sitting on your couch, yeah, you could definitely hear it.
Yeah.
But I would say that the Grand Pacific would be more reminiscent of the sound of an 810, I think.
Okay, because the 810 has more bass.
Yeah,
but
I know.
So it depends. It depends on what the person likes about that. If they like the brilliance and the brilliance and the brightness of it, then the Grand Auditorium is going to give them a little bit more than that. If they want the bass, then the Grand Pacific. Can I try something on here? Puff, puff, puff. Can you guys hear the puff, puff, puff when I do that?
Yeah.
Like the puff, the puff, 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 compared to ma, 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 pa, 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 right? Remember how when we first came out with
you can feel
kind of like the Grand Pacific, we taught people, put your hand in front of your mouth and say pa, 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 and you feel this wind hitting you. And if you say ma, 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 same note, you don't hit it. And with the Grand Pacific, what we were doing was to give that bass the richness, the depth, but without the puff of air, which gets in the way with microphones and this type of things. And so the Grand Pacific wasn't necessarily trying to copy a vintage guitar. It was trying to be a modern usable tone for what a lot of people try to use those guitars for, but might fit better in the modern world. Does that make sense to you, Andy Lund?
Yeah, after listening to your answer and pondering that for a minute or two, I understand what you're saying. And the thing that I thought about first before the puff of air was also when we talk about the shape of the notes of a traditional classic 814 or an 810, which are maybe a little bit more triangular. And the shape of a note of a Grand Pacific, which we call rounded, like more of like a bell curve, not as impactful on the attack, and a little bit more takes a little bit longer to get to you. A sharper note versus a rounded note. So yeah, I get your point.
Well, I think that the two hardest question categories to answer in the question and answer realm is, first of all, why don't you? That's an impossible question. Why don't you do something? It's a really hard question to answer. Why don't I do something? Because I don't, And then another one, and so then we work hard to answer that question, and we always try to answer that question, but it usually, sometimes people go, oh, I get it, and they turn around and walk away, but sometimes they're not salved by the answer. And then the other one is, which guitar am I going to like the sound of, right? And that's always hard. So it takes a lot of chit chat to replace one strum on a chord that someone listens to themselves and go, oh, I like that one,
Yeah.
Man, what's awesome is you guys are guitar nerds. And this is a guitar nerd talk show. You just nerded out. That was great. Sharpie, you got a question?
Yep. From Z, who is with us every week. Thanks for hanging out with us. He says, but how did Bob come up with the name Grand Auditorium?
That was a curtain bob thing. The Grand Auditorium was the first guitar that I really felt like the Taylor shape aesthetic was finally born. So when we first came into being, our shapes were clunky shapes that American Dream was making at the time when we bought that little shop. And they were sort of like a square-shouldered dreadnought that was bigger and squarer than Martin's. They weren't petite like Martin's, even though people think of that guitar as being big. Ours were bigger and uglier. And a Martin dreadnought is one of the most beautiful shapes there is in a guitar. It's just beautiful. And I could never bring myself to copy it exactly. And then we had this sort of jumbo shape that was reminiscent of the big Guild jumbos and the Gibson J200s. Our first small guitar was a Grand Concert, and we called it Grand Concert, probably from looking back at old guitars from a long time ago. Because when you think of the names of guitars, if you go back to the turn of the last century, they were like parlor guitars to play it in a parlor, you know, concert series to play in a concert. And they got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the biggest guitars then, there was no microphones, were like a concert type series guitar. And then the Dreadnought came out and Martin's like, what are we going to call this big beast? Well, let's name it after the battleships, you know, of World War I, right? Because they're the biggest ships out there. And that's where that name came from. So I think when we ended up with this Grand Concert, we said, well, this is bigger. It's kind of a similar shape. We're coming into our own. I drew that shape. And then the rest of the shapes that came throughout history were me and Larry Breedlove together, and then Andy's taken over, but we all have the genetic strain. And so we just thought, well, what's bigger than a concert? Maybe an auditorium, I don't know. And we've ended up with this sort of grand something syntax or nomenclature ever since, kind of just sort of sticking with the theme.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I got two questions. When will we see a GS Mini with a cutaway? That's by
maybe not within the next 5 years.
Because you know the 5-year plan. That's a good one.
Yeah. I think that our demand for GS Minis is so ridiculously high that it would actually be a foolish business move for us. But remember, we're a business. And we're nerds. We're nerdy businessmen. So you get the idea that just from listening to us talk, that we're all about you and your guitars and what we can make for you and all these things. But in the end, we also have 1,100 employees around the world to support. We have to make good business deals. We have to do things that our dealers can support. We've got a tool for these things. And so some of these things are strictly business model decisions. And if it doesn't fit, it just doesn't fit.
Awesome. I got another question. Bob, this is great because you just said something that it's a perfect segue. Bob, you praise competitors like in your recent post about Chris Martin on social media. What guitars inspired you in your building career? And do you own any other brands?
Okay, the first guitar that inspired me, I made my first guitar and then a banjo, and was 3/4, 7/8 of the way done with my second and third guitar before I ever heard of Martin guitars. And I'd heard of Gibson, but I'd never seen one. And when I finally did see one, it was an electric guitar, and if my memory serves me, it was probably an SG, but I didn't know what a Les Paul or an SG. I didn't even know what they were. I didn't know about Fender guitars. As far as I was concerned, making a guitar was something I'd seen Yamaha guitars because my friend had one. I didn't know anything about good guitars. Then one day I had a friend who had this old Martin guitar. And if I could go back in time, I would probably find out that it was a late 1800s, like New Yorker or parlor sized guitar. This is the memory I have. It was an all, I won't describe it too much, but I heard of this brand. I went down to a local music store after I graduated from high school. So I'm going to take back. It was 3/4 of the way through the guitar that I heard of Martin guitars. I'd never seen one except for that really ancient guitar until after I finished those 2 guitars. I graduated from high school and I had a couple of motorcycles. And I went into a music store and looked at a Martin guitar, and I saw a D18 in a glass case, cost $450. I picked it up and looked at it. And before that had happened, I watched the Johnny Cash show every week on television. And I could just tell that that guitar that he was playing, even though it was black, it turns out it was a D35 painted black, was a good guitar. It was like something about it. It all just looked right. And I went in, I picked up that guitar, I put my nose inside of it, I smelled it, I strummed it, I looked at it, and it was just like, could I ever make anything in my life that was made as well as this? And I went home, sold a motorcycle, went back and bought that guitar. And I had that guitar, and it just inspired me. I spent more time looking inside of it than playing it, smelling it, looking at the kerfing, looking at the braces, looking at the binding. I just couldn't believe that somebody could make a guitar like that. And so it was my goal to myself to just hate every guitar I made until I could make a guitar a little cleaner. Then I met John Larrivee some years into it, and his guitars were like that too. And I'm like, man, I'm a dope, I'm a monkey. I can't build a guitar that looks this good. So it was just like, I beat myself up. And I tell people it was 25 years before I liked one of our guitars. I just couldn't like it. And I say to people who work for me now, the worst combination is doing mediocre work and thinking it's good. If you're going to do mediocre work, at least know it's mediocre, because you're just not going to get better if you think your mediocre work is good. So I did mediocre work for a long time in terms of literal craftsmanship on the guitar and really getting things right. Luckily, the bones of my early guitars, they sounded good and played good, and people overlooked those sort of crude homemade elements that I just hated about them. I remember an ad we did once to the trades when someone wrote in and said, I bought this guitar and there's 4 things wrong with it. And I wrote back and I said, I'm going to tell you 12 more things that are wrong with it. And that was my answer to the customers. and we ended up doing a trade ad with it that wasn't a consumer ad. But it's like, I know those 4 things are wrong with your guitar. Let me tell you some more things. So I was super inspired by early Martins. When I finally found out that they were a company, I kept that guitar for until I became a guitar maker, and then I had to sell it because I had no money. And then John Larrivee became a friend, and I learned some stuff from him, really nice craftsmanship things. And I don't have those guitars now. I have a Collings guitar that I sent them some brilliant Brazilian rosewood 20 some years ago, and they made me an CJ out of it and sent it back. And I'll never get rid of that guitar. I have a couple of Tom Anderson electrics. I have a Paul Reed Smith guitar that Paul signed on the front. Paul Reed Smith with his gold pen. On the back, it says, "For Bob Taylor." So me and Paul are going to have to get good and dead, but I'm sort of thinking way out in the future. That guitar is kind of something, you know what I mean? Like, what if there was a Gibson guitar by Orville Gibson for Leo Fender or something like that? It would be for, Christian Frederick Martin III, something like that. That would be something. So I like that guitar. I have a guitar that was given to me as a gift by Martin Seeliger, Lakewood Guitars in Germany. And I love that guitar. So those have been my inspirations. But mostly my inspiration for guitars are the bad work that I did on the last guitar I made. That was my biggest driver. And that's the absolute truth.
Man, This has been amazing. We did hit our 45-minute mark, but if you want to go a little bit longer, Bob, that's up to you.
I can outlast everybody that's on the internet.
As he takes a sip, just owning it. Oh my God.
Oh, good.
This-
All right, Andy.
Hold on. This isn't a question, but I just got a feed of everyone talking about how when they get their new guitar and they smell the case and they smell their guitar, it's kind of what you do when you pull it out of the box for the first time. One of my buddies sprung and got a nice Taylor, his first like nice Taylor he got, and he opened it in front of me. I'm like, smell it. Like, just smell the sound hole. You know, it's cool how that's a thing.
It is a thing, and I'll tell you that a Taylor smells different than a Martin, and Martin has a smell. I'll never forget, as long as I live, the smell of my new D18, and Martin has a smell. And if you talk to Chris Martin, he'll say, we've tried to figure out how to can that smell and be able to squirt it out because we could sell it. And there's just not a way to do it. And our guitars don't smell like that at all. They smell like Southern California, you know. But it's amazing how these things, the combination of everything, and even just you just can't take the Taylor out of a Taylor.
Yeah. I've actually talked about that. I led a public tour, and I think you guys will all know about this. When you go into the room in the winter, the smell there, and I've brought it up where I'm like, we need to get Yankee Candle in here to figure out how to make this a candle.
There you go.
The smell of the factory in these areas is so good, you know.
It really is good.
When we open the tours back up and we're able to host everybody, anybody who's watching this, come take a tour and hang out with us and smell what I'm talking about.
That'd be fun. I'm going to tell you just a real quick story. We have these things we call wood tunnels. They're out behind the factory. We stack wet wood in them, like neckwood, mahogany. We blow air by them to kind of pre-dry them before they go into kilns. And I went by this, and this is going to sound odd, but I went by this, and there's wet wood, air blowing through it. I walk my wood on this property every day. I look at all the wood every day. And I walked in there and I took a smell, and I haven't been able to go to Cameroon for a year and a half, right? And it just took me instantly to landing in Africa. And the funny thing about it is mahogany is not from Africa, but tropical woods have a smell. And this humid air that was blowing on me from the fans and the smell of wet mahogany, I could just see myself getting off the plane and walking out of the airport in Yaoundé. It's amazing. Jay, you've been there. You know what it smells like. It's something you can find that if you go to other tropical places. It's not an arid San Diego smell. It's not a pine forest Washington smell. It's really interesting.
It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. Andy, do you have another question?
Yeah, I got one more. What I would like to ask Bob what he thinks is his greatest contribution to the guitar world, or what is if it's one, or maybe it's you can have. This is your show, so you can answer. You can have more than one answer if you want. But what's your greatest contribution? What's the thing you're most proud of that you've brought to the guitar world?
I'm going to say guitars that are easier to play, acoustic guitars that are easy enough to play to allow us to sell guitars to electric guitar players. For the first 10 years we were in business, when nobody wanted an acoustic guitar from us. I mean, we went to a dealer once and he picked up one of our guitars and he said, the only thing wrong with this guitar, you want to know what it is? And we were like, what? And he goes, it don't say Martin, you know? And like literally, it was like, it's a good guitar, but it's the wrong brand, right? People did not need another acoustic guitar in their lives. And we sold to electric guitar players, and that in turn blended electric guitar talent into the acoustic guitar. It also caused other guitar makers to up their game and make their guitars easier to play, which I'm not sure they would have gotten there on their own. So I would say, if the history book is written sometime, if someone said, hey, he left the guitar industry in better shape than he found it, and one of the main contributions was really concentrating on that very, it's not so subjective. It's an objective thing of making a guitar better. And all the things I had to do that, I would say that's my biggest contribution. Am I the most proud of that? Maybe not. I might be proud of other things more, but I think that's the biggest contribution.
That's something that you can't see either, really. For most people, when they look at a wall of guitars, or especially a beginner, that's hard. It's a hard concept to explain to somebody, you know.
Yeah, marketing guys have a term called obvious value.
Yeah.
You know, so two-piece fancy rosewood back is like obvious value, but what we put into that guitar that makes it cost more than $600 to make it be. I was going over some questions, and there was someone who was saying, I've had to buy Taylor's and get the next reset right away. How come? And it's like, well, that's a hard one to answer because I don't know where you live and I don't know what you need. But the fact is that our necks are so easily resettable, which is why we did all of that, is so that when that needs to happen, I could say that about other brands too, but you can't reset them. So anyways, what we did there was very objective, measurable, repeatable, and repairable and fixable to allow people to play their guitar, because you're not going to get to the music if you can't play the thing.
That's awesome. Hey, I think we will start to wrap this show up just so that we don't stay on here all night long. I got a question. Then I think we should go to Sharpie's question. Then we have a new segment.
Okay.
We're not going to play Stump the Guest tonight. We're going to play Ask Bob. Huh? That's a good idea. It's a really good idea. I know. I just came up with that. Anyway. All right. So I got this question here, and then we'll go to Sharpie's question. So the question is, Bob, what is your thinking about the new 816? I'm glad I bought mine several years ago. I am not a fan of the newest version.
He doesn't like the V-class bracing, maybe?
I don't
that what
think
he's
he
talking
likes
about?
the Builder's Edition, the Soundport Cutaway.
Oh, the 816, yeah. The thinking is that this is a very clever understanding of a second sound port by Andy. And I'm going to start for a second and just say that when Andy came on as our new designer, it's because I have more than 100% faith in Andy. He's a better builder than I do. He figures things out. He has deep, deep knowledge. He's super clever. He's very inventive. He's very well studied. His 10,000 hours have been put in multiple times on all these topics. And he got critical in it. Critical is a negative word, but Andy looked at guitars with second sound ports and they're like, well, first of all, a sound port, two sound holes that are like this, one going this way and one going that way, acoustically don't make sense to Andy. He could explain all this. He could nerd out on that for 30 minutes. And the other is it was so that the player could hear. But if you had two sound ports coming forward, or mostly forward, you get that out to the audience, okay? So he had this thought, do this scooped cutaway. That cutaway you see sometimes in cool ukuleles and stuff. Some guitar builders are doing this little scoop. Adding a sound port there, what it actually does is it gives a something millisecond delay. In other words, it's coming out to you. So it's almost like hitting that phase button. And there's a delay. You hear the sound from here, you hear the sound from here, plus you hear the sound off the top. And as it's for the audience, it's not for the player. And I don't know, Jay, Sharpie, Andy, if you could corroborate what I'm saying, but when you sit in front of that guitar, it's a pleasure. And maybe it's not for the player.
It's almost, when I first heard that instrument, I thought it was, I think we all had a similar feeling. When we saw it, we went, what is that thing?
Yeah, he's just throwing marketing challenges at us, you know?
Right. And then Andy played it. And the way I explained it, I think I may have explained it last week even. If you think of our regular, think of an 814C with a very triangular note, and you think of a Grand Pacific with a very rounded note. If I were to explain it, and the way I articulated this back to Andy is that this one almost has a blossomed note. It's already there. It's big. It's orchestral. I don't know if I would ever plug it in, ever. I heard somebody say once, it's the greatest couch guitar of all time. It's pretty incredible. So we feel you. We understand that it might look weird. I would do yourself a favor and pick one up when you have a chance and just play it, because it's magic.
Yeah, there's people that are going to like it and people that aren't.
Totally.
But we do think there's a cool factor to it. I like it. And we put a lot of work. And by the way, when Andy designs things, I let him design them, but I walk through all the time and go, yeah, I wonder about such and so. And he's like, oh, that's a good idea. And so I have a little bit of hand in, not the tone. He just annihilates me tone-wise. I just don't understand how he understands tone and knows what to do to get tone. I'll never have that. But I have a pretty good eye for design. And so if Andy designs a guitar, sometimes I feel like, hey, I had input on about 10% of that, you know, of something that, and what's really interesting is Andy will say, hey, can you come up here? I got 16 rosettes. I want you to see which one is your favorite. And I'll look at them, I'll go, this one's my favorite, this one's my second favorite, but I wouldn't do the second, I would do this one. What are you putting it on? He goes, well, that was my choice too. So we're like two total peas in a pod. We like the same thing. And so even when he's designing that guitar, we talked about different little things, but mostly I think it's a cool guitar and has a purpose when you sit in front of it. Andy Lund, do you like sitting in front of that guitar?
Yeah, I think it's like a real immersive experience. Like even not even in front of it, but sitting, having it in front of you and hearing the sound. It just sounds much wider to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to use the word stereo, but it sounds.
Yeah, it's almost like you push the spacious button.
Yeah. It just sounds really wide. It fills up a lot of space, and it's a new sound. It's a sound we've never heard before.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. And when a sound port comes out of the side, it doesn't do that. You don't really get that same thing. You get a better earful as a player.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think it's a cool thing.
Awesome. All right. We've hit that time of the show. We really appreciate everybody who's joined us. I know we didn't get all the questions, and you know what? We're just going to have to do this again. Hopefully we'll get Bob to agree.
I'll do rapid fire all day, all night.
Ooh.
And I know that we got to probably a fourth of the questions. Some might be repeats, but I'll bet you we didn't get 25% of the way through the questions.
No, I think that we didn't, and we will. We'll bring this back. I would love to do this as a repeat show on a regular basis. That would be incredible. But now it's time. It's time for a Sharpie's question.
Sometimes questions are subtle. Sometimes lines are crossed. Sharpie, don't try to stump him. Remember who is the boss. Here comes Sharpie's question.
Oh my gosh. Before I ask that question, somebody in the feed would say that they need you to write the soundtrack to their life. Which is awesome. Bob, my question tonight for you has nothing to do with guitars, but it's a fun way to get to know people. Favorite book, album, or movie? What would you recommend to check out? One or all three? What do you got?
Enchanted Vagabonds for a book. It's a story of Dana and Ginger Lamb, 1932. They lived in Orange County. He was older than her. She was 20. He was 30. They built a little canoe / kayak / sailing vessel. They paddled it to San Diego Bay. They parked it by the Star of India, which was there in those days. And then they went on a 2-year journey in that thing. and every day they almost died. And it's a great look at Baja California 100 years ago. And they went through the Panama Canal. They got off the ship and went into some incredible places. It's obscure. You have to buy it on Amazon. I love that book. If anybody likes adventures, that's a really, really good one. So what else?
We just started our book club. Us are going to read that and send you books.
Yeah. I buy that book by the tens, and I buy them a dozen at a time and I give them to people.
That's awesome.
And did you say, was I just picking one, or did I have to do song, movie, everything?
You could do all three or just one, but the other two was favorite album that everyone should listen to, or if there's a movie that you think everyone should see.
I would see the Cesar Chavez movie. I think you have to see it, rent it, or buy it on iTunes. I don't think it's on Netflix. Find out what he's about. Look at California in those days. That movie is totally worth watching. It's not a documentary. It's a film. It's a movie, and totally worth watching. I have a huge heart for Mexico, and well, it's our culture here, but I think knowing what happened in those days is really worth it. So that's a movie I'd recommend, and an album. You know what I've been digging lately? I guess I listened to it 25 times in a row. It'll be on my last October Baja trip. I just put it in and listened to it over and over and over. Can't Buy a Thrill, Steely Dan. It's so good.
Nice.
And then right behind that, I put Highways and Heartaches by Ricky Skaggs.
Love it.
Go,
and those
everybody.
two things couldn't be too different, but they're so good. And then there's another one, A Rock Encounter with Jeff Beck and Sabikis, and nobody even knows about this. This is flamenco meets rock, and it's called A Rock Encounter, and you're going to probably have to listen to it on YouTube. I told Terry Myers about it the other day. He's like, who's been keeping this from me?
Wow.
I'm writing
Yeah.
all of this down.
How
I'm going
was
to
that?
check it all out.
I've never heard about that.
It's 1970 something, Andy.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. All right.
Yeah.
All right. The last segment of the night. It's this new thing we're calling Ask Bob. All right. Here we go. Bob, you watch the show regularly. You know that I wear baseball hats, every different baseball hat for the guest who's on. Well, truth of the matter is, this one is not for you. Here's why. It's for my buddy, future Hall of Famer Adam Wainwright, who wanted to buy a custom Koa guitar, and I talked him into a GS Mini because that's what he really wanted. And he did, and he got it, and he loved it. You're not a sports guy. You told me this once we were traveling. You're like, Jay, I just don't care. Okay, I'll take that. But my Ask Bob question is, if you were to pick your favorite all-time NBA coach, who would it be, and can we meet him?
You talking about Cousin Phil?
Yeah, him. What's his name? Phil Jackson?
Yeah.
Let's get him on the show.
All right. Those of you
My grandmother when I was growing up, I was tall, and I was in high school, and she's like, this is Grandma Taylor. She's like, are you playing basketball? You're tall. You really should play more basketball. Are you going out for the team? I'm in 10th grade, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, please don't throw the ball to me. Don't throw the ball to me. Please cut me from these tryouts. So I went and did it because Grandma wanted me to, but she would always go, Philip, he's doing so well in basketball. He was playing on the Knicks at the time. He's doing so well in basketball, and I think that you might be able to do well too. You're not quite as tall as him. I have a picture of me and Phil and my dad, and if I could find it fast on my iPhone, I could hold it up to the camera. Phil and my dad make me look like literally a 12-year-old, and I'm not a small person. It's just so funny. I can't remember if I put this in my favorites. If I did, I'll show you. If I didn't, we'll save it for another day. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to see if you can see this. Can you? Let me see.
Other side.
To this,
Other side. There it is. Right there.
Okay, look at Phil. Look at how huge he is compared to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 6'1".
That's such a grandmother thing to say.
Philip's doing so well in basketball.
So well. Yeah. I love
For
that.
those of
Well,
you,
anyways,
Knicks, he's doing pretty.
Now my whole family have been, you know, they were of course Lakers fans, and before that, you see what I'm saying, Bulls fans, you know, and they would just watch every game that Phil ever did, and they're pretty into it. But I'm just like, I walk through the room and I'm like, are the snacks out yet? I'll come back when they're out, and I'll leave when they're gone.
it's so good. You know what, Bob? I appreciate that you're honest and true, and you stick to your guns, and you always have. And that's we love that about you. Yes, for those of you who don't know, cousin Phil is Phil Jackson. He's won a couple of championships with the Bulls and the Lakers, so that's a good one. And I knew I'd figure out how to turn this into a sports show.
You really have. Every week it's baseball. Now we're moving to basketball. This is good. Bob, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We'd love to have you back on. Everyone here seems like they were just loving talking to you, and a lot of questions are still coming through that we'll have to revisit. Did get called out just now because on 10th week, right? We're on our 10th week. Almost missed it. Shout out to our left-handed players. If you're lefty, you can get a Taylor guitar at no extra charge. We love you. If you can't find one in store, you can always get that ordered from your dealer.
Hey, do you know
So
some of the background to that?
Yep. It's
Do you know one of the reasons why we
Big
made
Mike,
that?
right?
Yeah, Uncle Mike, my brother-in-law. So when I made my second and third guitar, they were twin guitars. One of them was lefty, one of them was righty, because my brother-in-law, who I played with since we were in 6th grade, was left-handed. So it started there. It's like, I'm going to make guitars for lefties.
As someone who was born severely, I have to thank you for that.
Mhm.
Growing up, it was, you could go to Guitar, the same dusty stir, and the last fingerprints for mine from the months before. So
Those are like my tire
so
tracks
thank you
in
for
Baja.
offering that to people like me.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, we will wrap up. Thanks again, Bob. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate everybody who joins us week in and week out. We appreciate the questions that you guys have sent. We will have Bob back for another live Ask Bob. But for now, join us next week. I do have to remember our plug for next week. We have our VP of production, Chris Wellens, on, and we're going to talk about the difference between manufacturing across borders. What does that really look like for Taylor Guitars? That's a good one. Come hang out with us with Chris Wellens. And for now, signing off, Taylor Primetime again. See you next week, same time. Hey, Andy, take it away.
What time was it? What time was it? It was prime time. It was prime time. What was it? What the heck was that? It was prime time. It was prime time. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for taking time out of your day, for telling us about Cesar Chavez, making projects underway. Thanks for cool body shapes and for helping us to hear the music that we want to make. Thanks for filling up our ears on Tuesday on prime time. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you, Andy.
Prime time.
Hey, Sharpie. Thanks.
Thanks,
You guys
have a good
rule.
one, guys.
Thank you for taking care of our company the way you guys do. Thanks for loving Taylor.
Well, thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.